Hi, everybody. We're upstairs in the addition. We're going to talk about how to actually wire up an outlet today. So you've seen all the slides. You've seen you've hopefully watched Mr. McMullen in electrical safety and so forth. Now we're actually going to do this. We're going to take and wire up an outlet. So first thing first that you need to know, looking at this outlet over here, this is actually a light switch. You can see that if I'm standing straight up, it's right at hand level. Well, McMullen, why are you going to put an outlet there? Because it's the same principle. We're going to show you how to also do a light, or a switch, excuse me, but I'm going to put an outlet here, or we're going to pretend like there's going to be an outlet. Well, Mr. McMullen, isn't that going to mess things up? No. Right now we're in the rough-in stage. Nothing's live. I can touch this all I want. There's nothing hooked up at the actual breaker box at all. And Mr. McMullen, how do you know that? Haven't you tested this? I haven't hooked it up. I'm the only one working on this. So I know. There's actually two wires coming into this, and that's because this bottom wire that you see here comes in from our outlet down below, and that'll have live electricity coming in, and then this one goes up to our light, and that'll feed our light. So this will actually be a switch, and when these two connect, switch turns on. But we're going to put one of them away, and we're going to pretend like it's not even there. We're going to pretend like this is just an outlet. Now, sometimes outlets do have two cords going in because maybe you want to run where you have multiple outlets on the same wire. Then yes, what electricity coming in goes through an outlet and then travels on to the next outlet. So you may see it where you have two outlets. But for this, we're just going to wire up one outlet. So the first thing first, let's pretend like this has drywall on it. Our drywall is all done. It's painted. And now we're going to start putting the actual electrical components in. First thing, I had this really long piece. I would normally cut this back a little bit, but because I'm still going to leave this in rough-in, we're going to pretend like it's about 6 inches shorter than what you're actually seeing. So I'm actually going to stuff part of it back in there, and we're going to pretend like that's what it looks like. Hey, there it is. This is what it looks like. So first thing first, we have a sheathing on the outside. Tools we're going to need for this whole entire thing. I would recommend getting a nice set of needle nose pliers, something that you can open up with one hand. They don't necessarily have to be spring-loaded. Get an actual carpet knife or utility knife. You probably won't use it, but just in case, you may need it. Get yourself a nice pair, and they don't necessarily have to be electricians' screwdrivers, but it does help to have an insulated handle. Phillips and flathead. And then lastly, oops, those have nails in them. Let's see. We'll need an outlet. Hey, I got an outlet. You'll want a pair of actual wire strippers. A couple different styles. I actually prefer this because I can go pretty much almost any size wire, and I can cut. These are nice. Get a good set. Klein makes good stuff. Whoops. My utility knife. And the last thing is this little handy thing. This is actually called a Romex stripper. What it is there's just a little tiny sharp piece of metal in there, and this is going to strip away our sheathing. Now you can use a razor blade, but I really highly recommend not doing that, because if you don't know what you're doing, you can slip and cut your fingers. It actually does happen. And number two, if you cut too deep into your hot or neutral, well then what are you going to do? You've nicked the wire and now it's exposed. So this little thing here, all you do is you slide it up to where you want to start stripping. Typically, our code says you want to strip back all the way until almost, the very back of the box. But for what we're going to do right now, I'm just going to strip the first little bit. And you just pull, and there it is. It's cut. It doesn't cut too deep. We'll pull that back, and then let me get our wire cutter. Oops. Or you can use your utility knife. Here, we use a utility knife for this. We'll strip. There's paper, as you can see, and then there's our hot, our black, our neutral's white, and then our bare copper's ground. We'll take all this stuff, pull it off to the side, and just cut it off, and I throw it on the ground because we're going to come back and clean. Now we're ready to start actually stripping the wire. What we're going to do is we're going to come back 1/2 inch to 3/8 of an inch. You don't need a lot. On the black wire, remember, we're just going to take off that outside rubber coating. We don't want to actually take and cut into the wire. It weakens the wire, and of course, again, you don't want to cut your wire. Same with the neutral. There we go. About 1/2 inch. Now on the outlet itself, hopefully you can see it in the light, there's gold screws, silver screws, and a green screw. Notice there's 2 sets of silver, 2 sets of gold. If there was a second wire in here that we wanted to run to another outlet, that's what we would hook it into, is the second wire. But since there isn't, we're going to take one of those, and I prefer, you can use a flat or a Phillips, but I have a general rule of thumb, whenever you can use a Phillips, use a Phillips. You'll also see there's a thin metal tab in here. You could break that apart and actually have these on 2 separate circuits, or maybe one controlled by a switch. You got a lot of different things you can do. But for this, we're just going to leave it stock. We're going to screw in the top 2 because we're not going to use them. McMullen, there's these little holes in the back. What are those for? You can actually take and stick your wire in there, tighten these down, and have it connected that way. I don't do that. I don't like it at all. All right, so here's where the magic happens. And this is where you may be asked about this when it comes to be Thursday. We're going to take our wire, and then this is where I like to use needle nose. Some people just will use their wire cutters or whatever, and we'll put a little loop on it. We'll do the same for our neutral, and we'll do our same for our ground. Then, gold gets hot. So, black is hot, black will go to gold. We put the wire in there, making sure that it's nice and tight around that loop. If I had to, I can use that pair of needle nose to make sure that that loop is around there. And then this is the important part. Notice that as I turn, the wire actually gets drawn around the screw. So if I turn this way, I want my loop to go that way. If my loop goes the other way, there's a good chance that as I tighten this, it's going to kick the loop out. Or over time, you know, who knows, thunder crashes in your neighborhood and so forth, they may work loose. So you always want to make sure the loop is going with the direction you're turning. Okay, our black's in. Notice no exposed wires out behind that. We'll go to the other side. Same thing. I want to make sure that my loop is going in the direction of what I'm actually going to be tightening. Looks good. Tighten that down. And then for our copper, same thing. Our copper is our ground. While some can argue that, yes, the neutral is also technically a ground because it does get connected into the ground part of the panel, you want that actual bare ground because that's going to save your life if anything ever shorts out. So now technically this is wired. Our hot is to gold. Our neutral is to silver. They've been wrapped around. There's no exposed wire back here at all. Yes, there is exposed copper wire, and we do have to be careful that when we tuck this back into the box that that wire doesn't get pushed onto the hot terminals. Make sure, too, you remember that once this is energized, you touch these screws, you're going to get poked. So to put this back in there, it's as simple as taking your wires and just gently, you don't want to jam or smash them in there, but just gently push them back in. And this is where normally actually like a powered screwdriver is nice because doing these little screws, it seems like it takes forever. I would not recommend a powered screwdriver on the actual terminals, but to do these, to put it in the actual boxes, it's actually a lot faster and easier to use a powered screwdriver. And again, powered screwdriver, not a drill or drill motor, but just an actual powered screwdriver. They make them. But hand tools work. And as you tighten it, you can see that this can move a little bit, center it in the box. And then from there, your cover plate will go over top of this. So if we were getting ready for, say, our electrical final inspection, I'd have everything tucked in like I do. I've had all the wires cut back. And believe it or not, they're probably not going to open up the box and look. They want to see everything done and finished, at least in this township. So get everything squared up, make it look nice. Tighten these down the rest of the way. I always like to look in and make sure my ground didn't get somehow pushed around to touch my hot or my neutral. The ground looks pretty good. I'm going to actually tuck it in a little bit back there out of the way. Looks good. And then this is not the correct cover plate, but then we would put our cover plate on. This one is made for a square or a duplex. That's a square, maybe a toggle switch or a GFI. And then your 2 bolts here would actually tuck into 2 tabs that would be there. This one is your screw holes in the middle, and we would technically have our screw there to put the cover plate on, but I don't have the correct cover plate. They're downstairs, and for what we're going to do, yeah, you don't need it. So, that's how to wire up an outlet. The key things that I want you to remember: black goes to gold, white goes to silver or neutral, and bare copper green goes to bare copper goes to the green screw. Never mix those around. Always have it that way. You know, if you do mix around the hot and neutral on the light, it probably wouldn't matter, but you run anything with electric motor, it's going to run backwards and ruin the motor or damage the motor. So it's very important to make sure your your black goes to gold. Make sure you have the screw wrapped around in the direction that you turn so that the wire gets pulled in to the actual terminal. And then just double check everything as you put it together. Tuck that wire in. And again, I would recommend using the right tools to strip your wire. You don't want to actually cut into any of the wires and expose anything. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask. On Thursday, we'll be wiring up a light switch, and I'll have some questions for you after that. Light switch is similar, but a little bit different. Till then, talk to you later.